Hi, it's Romilly with Golden Circle Designs, and today we're going to work on the Chevron Stitch. So being called because it makes little triangles and all attached to each other with a line. I've also every once in a while heard it called the Triangle Stitch, although there is another stitch also called the Triangle Stitch. So let's just get started. With the right hand, we will be starting on the left side and moving left to right. And so we're going to bring the needle up from the back, and we're going to make a little straight stitch. This is another one of those stitches that's all made out of straight stitches. And we're going to come up in between where we brought the thread up and took it back down. Sometimes it's usually easier to bring it back up before you actually make the stitch. And now we're going to make the first, that's the cover stitch. We're going to make the first leg of the triangle. So we're going to come up here at a diagonal and take the thread back down. Another straight stitch. And then we're going to come up backwards about half the length that you want the stitch to be. And like we did on the bottom, we're going to take another straight stitch, sorry about that, and bring the needle up in that same hole right where we were with that diagonal. And then we're going to go diagonally down. The reason we're going left to right, if you're going to work in a different direction, it doesn't matter which direction you go. If you're going to stab the thread up and down, it doesn't matter which direction you go. But there's another horizontal stitch. But again, this is designed so that we can more easily do this with a sewing method. So we're pushing the needle right to left instead of left to right when we do this. So that goes there. We're going to want that under that loop. And then down into the diagonal. And the horizontal stitch. And back up the diagonal. This doesn't look like a very versatile stitch, but it really is. You can make your stitches much more vertical and smaller. Like this. The real width of your V is determined by how wide you make that bottom stitch. Whether or not because if the top stitches and bottom horizontal stitches touch, that will define how narrow you can make it. Wide, you can bring them back and make them touch, or you can just finish off each diagonal with that horizontal line. So over. Remember to make that horizontal line before you go to the next diagonal, or you'll end up with a herringbone stitch. So we're going to down, over, horizontal stitch. Oops. Pull that down, bring the needle back up in that hole, up at a diagonal, and while you can leave it at the end just like that, it's usually a little bit cleaner because the first stitch starts with that horizontal, to just put a final horizontal stitch on it. And that's your chevron stitch. And now we'll move on to the left hand. Okay, here we are back with the left hand. Now you'll notice that when I start the thread, I start it at the far right side of where I want the stitches to go. My first stitch is going to be the horizontal line at the bottom, and we bring it down, and I usually leave it a little bit loose and pull the loop down so that I can see where the middle of it is. And then I pull that up. When you work with a stab stitch like this, you can work in any direction you want. You could go left to right the way the right-handed folks do. You can go right to left the way left-handed people find it easier. And we're going to go diagonal. We're going to go make this top horizontal line after that diagonal. Always remember to make your horizontal lines, otherwise your stitch is going to turn into a herringbone stitch. They are related. But this is just straight stitches, and it's just which order you put the stitches in. So, diagonal. Over here. Over, and then in order to get the diagonal stitch going again, I'm going to leave that loop out of the way and come up in that same hole so that that cross is there. So we've got a diagonal, and back. These are basically a little back stitch, which seals the stitch really nicely. And sometimes, and then we're going to bring that up in that same hole. Let's see if I've got in that same hole that I took for the diagonal. Now, the reason I teach it this direction, even though either could work, is because it's much easier to sew with your left hand if you're going this way. So there's your first diagonal stitch, and then we're going to make the horizontal stitch, coming back up in that hole that matches the diagonal, and then we're going to take our next diagonal stitch and back a little bit and stretch out and diagonal. Now notice that this is above the loop. We want that we want the loop above the needle, so that it comes out the bottom of that stitch. So that's something to keep an eye on. And here we want the loop below the stitch so that it comes out the top. There's your horizontal stitch, and there's your diagonal. We'll make the diagonal a little bit more vertical. The various ways that you can vary the size and shape of this stitch. Adjust as a very small little horizontal stitch. But changing the size and shape of this stitch allows you to do a lot more with it. If I go very small and vertical, I'll get quite a different look than the wide stitches that I started with. Untwist your thread. The easiest way to do that is to hang it and let the thread dangle. And a little tiny stitch there, and then we can go back to wide. But this is the gist of the chevron stitch. You can put them in rows, you can make borders, you can make them into mountains, possibly even grasses. Because we started the stitch with a horizontal stitch crossing down here, it's much better, it's usually easier and cleaner if you end it with a similar line on the other side. And that's the chevron stitch. So go have fun, play around with it, see what you can do. And we'll see you next week, and we're going to move on to Satin Stitch, which is a deceptively simple little stitch. And if you're enjoying these, please remember to subscribe to my video channel or to my blog, which is at goldencircledesigns.com, and it's down in the links if you're interested. And I've also got some embroidery designs on Etsy if you're interested in those. Talk to you later. Bye.